maybe I will start just going to welcome along Professor Hsiung and hopefully and welcome to you all, warm welcome to you all. I'm Fred Amon. I'm the new director of the Institute for Advanced Study, and it's a great pleasure for me to be at the Institute and to launch my directorship, as it were, with this great occasion today and our wonderful guest, Professor Hsiung, who is here from the Academia Sinica in Taipei, Taiwan. Professor Lynn Struve will be introducing her momentarily at length, and I just want to take a couple of minutes to say a couple of words about the Institute. Many of you know a great deal about it, perhaps some of you don't know much about it, but let me just say that one of the purposes of the Institute is to bring to campus distinguished scholars who will spark a dialogue and spark a conversation between and among and within departments and schools and campuses throughout Indiana University. And so our goal is to be interdisciplinary, to talk about ideas in ways that cross boundaries, that pull a lot of people into the conversation, and give us all a chance to learn new things and to think in new ways about some of the areas that we study. So we couldn't have a better beginning than Professor Hsiung, whose work is broadly interdisciplinary, deals with modern Chinese cultural and social history, the history of children, gender studies, Chinese health and culture, to name but a few. And it's our great pleasure to have you here, to welcome you here, and to let you know how much we appreciate you being here. And I'd like to ask Professor Lynn Struve from the Department of History to introduce Professor Hsiung.
Thank you. Well, the usual academic information is that, again, Professor Hsiung is located, you want to find her office, in the Institute of Modern History at the Academia Sinica in Taipei. I should stress that that is a very interdisciplinary place, and she has a great deal to do, especially with colleagues also in the Institute of Ethnology and the Institute of History and Philology there, especially. It's a very exciting place to visit as a scholar or a student. And I can attest to that. She's not only a senior researcher in the Institute, but she also, from time to time, is a welcome professor. She teaches sometimes, I'm sure to the great delight of students, at various universities in the Taipei area. And you'll soon discover what a great pleasure she is to learn from as a lecturer. I should add to the standard information that by no means is she an ivory tower intellectual. I was just mentioning to Professor Amon how it's quite typical for those in the professions in Taiwan to engage themselves very actively in the public sphere. And I wanted to stress today that Professor Hsiung, besides generating many articles and single-authored books and edited books and publishing a great deal in the academic press, she's also been very actively engaged in the public sphere through engagement with social agencies and the educational system and the mass media to help people of Chinese heritage through a more accurate understanding of their own social heritage, to deal with various problems of what I guess could be called family engineering, that is when and how to have children of what genders, so this is a continuing concern of Chinese families. It leads to social problems, problems of child rearing, problems of child-parent relations, and of course of primary education. She's been very actively engaged in public issues of this nature, appearing on television and other mass media, writing articles and such. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome her back here. Many of you, some of you may recall that she was here very briefly 2 years ago and gave for mainly the East Asianists a completely jaw-dropping talk on a very original area of research, that is Chinese texts on male reproductive health and male reproductive dysfunction. I never knew that there were texts about male reproductive problems in Chinese culture before, but we certainly learned about it last time. And during that brief visit, we all became very aware that there was active, very lively interest in many facets of her work on the part of other students and scholars here at IU. There's so many different perspectives that I actually had to write them down so that I wouldn't forget. Oh, I should mention that she brought along with her and always provides me with copies of her books in Chinese. She's presented me with copies of this one book I'm particularly fond of. It's about childhood, history of childhood through memories of adults, Chinese adults, their memories of their childhood, particularly in the later imperial era, roughly the 15th through the 19th centuries. I'm interested in memory studies, so this is particularly along my lines and has got us going together in a big project in memory studies in China. Another book on childhood maladies and childhood health. And the most recent book, Yo-Yo, on, again, child rearing and care and upbringing of children in mainly the later imperial era of China, but also going back and citing sources from even a remote history. I'm glad to report that a book that she's authored on the history of memory, sorry, here I go on my bag again, the history of childhood in China, with the lead title of A Tender Voyage. The Tender Voyage is now in progress at the Stanford University Press and should appear, in a year or so. So you can read, if you don't read Chinese, you can read her work in English before long. Angles of interest that especially historians, I think, find in her work, and nowadays everybody's approaching things from a historical angle. I'm quite self-satisfied to point out. Historians especially who are interested in history of memory, history of the family, history of sexuality. She's going to participate next week in the Kinsey Institute on intercultural perspectives on women's sexuality, demographics and human reproduction, how the culture of human reproduction affects demographic patterns. She gave a talk on this just yesterday. History of medicine, especially pediatrics and the treatment of reproductive dysfunctions. History of the ideas of the human and of human society, and how those ideas are represented in historical artifacts. We were just talking yesterday with Anne Carmichael about getting a project, possibly producing a book on how children and childhood are portrayed in Chinese art, which is quite special in the world phenomenon of this. And also, as the graduate students and faculty here well know, people are interested in the history of worldviews and philosophies and religious beliefs that intersect with all of the matters I've just listed. And now today, we have crafted for us something of a folkloristic approach in the genesis and perpetuation of a certain kind of game in Chinese society over there the centuries. So this would be, for me, a new view of her work, a folkloristic topic. So without taking up more of her time and your time for questions afterwards, I will turn it over to my dear friend and colleague, Chen Hsiung.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a truly, delightful occasion, and to show my appreciation, I decided to share with you this topic of delight about games and entertainment and children's play in Chinese history. This is the first piece. I've been, at this topic for a while, but this will be a first time that I would talk about this. It's about the subjects that these three little children were looking intensely at in that little urn. I often asked people to guess what were they doing. And I'm tempted actually yesterday to go out to a pet shop to present you with a live example of it. It's cricket. But the pet shops here in America, they only have these cricket as food for lizards. So not the same kind. If you are a zoologist, you will realize there are actually 100 plus different kind of crickets. And only one of the 100 plus, the males of those kind, would engage in any kind of a combat kind of confrontation. So this is a very curious story. And the reason I want to tell you something about the story behind this, some would say a quintessential Chinese game, because there are ample stories, artwork, novels, poems, lyrics, songs wrote about this. It's because I don't know whether you have encountered the saying, the French Anon school, at their high time of influence, one of them made this very interesting remark. He says that a well-trained mind, if this person were to pick up a leaf, a piece of falling leaf, like off those, any falling leaves, a single piece, on the bank of, he said, the Amazon River. If this person is knowledgeable and witty and imaginative enough, with just that one single piece of leaf, he or she would be able to tell you everything that's happening to this entire world, in terms of climate, in terms of, everything. So I'm going to try to experiment like that. And those little fellows, it's my falling leaf, the crickets. Okay, so the way I'm going to, at the end, you could tell me, we could all discuss, how this experiment. I have methodological reasons for wanting to try this. But let me just explain to you the way I would structure my talk is I would zoom in at sort of almost the tail end of the story, that is 16th, 17th century, when this finally began a game. It's actually a very peculiar development that took people from the 12th to gradually, with lapses between the 12th, 13th century to about 16th century. So I was zooming at the end tail of the development, and then, follow the trailing of the documentation. The documentation actually was produced after all that we know about crickets and things would go back to the classical times, and then I would cover 3 periods. In the classical times, when this creature was believed to be of the category of birds. And then the medieval period, a movable flying birds. And then to the medieval period when people would actually be drawn to the feature of the beautiful song of these birds. And then finally coming to say that how it ever become that they were made to be ferocious gladiators, representing everybody. There's something that's happening to that society, that empire, to the politics, to the culture, to the economy, to the intellect, to the philosophy, to the religion, that made everybody to drop all the rest of the games and finally wanted, the young, the old, man, woman, all think that this is the game, that they would have their nostalgia and songs built on. Okay, so, and I have a few sets of illustration to, sort of take you through that time. The first set of illustrations I would just, we would just show very quickly. These are the various kind of games, other games that were going on about town, out on the country from the 12th to the 16th century, this period, crucial period. Okay, this is a sort of peddler carrying, art historians counted 500 toys on the tool stand. And you see, 6, if you could count it right and look closely, there's one behind on the other side of 6 kids, with a rural woman approaching the stand, trying to grab it. Okay, what would they want to play? Let's show, from artistic work, the kind of things. Here's a balancing game made of the nut of dates that was supposed to inculcate, tell children about the principle of yin-yang balance. If you push that, okay, and then there are these games, they're not really games, but the pastimes that adults would like children to be attracted to, looking at art and sort of out in the open. They're the games that children would be more, naturally drawn to: wrestling, looking at fish in the water. There are these, hide and seek, and or you could get up on the swing. These are all artworks. Let me just mention one thing. This genre of children at play is very special to the Chinese, to the world history in terms of art, because this is the only genre of art when you would see not only children, real children depicted in social setting before the modern times, but also if you look at this art, these are huge pieces, in the Palace Museum, you would see nothing but children depicted in artwork. And that's European art historian and social historian would say that that's very special. Okay, they could be roasting buns in this kind of weather to, I won't say play with food, but sort of have fun with what they like to eat. Or the more elegant drawing would show them catching, willow furry in the spring. That's an elegant thing. Or this is playing, the next thing is playing pretense, sort of acting with, playing, pretend, put on capes and gowns, marching with horses and wheels. Okay, and then this is the final of this set of, or just simply, make a rowdy scene in a room. They're supposed to be, probably sit down and study, and you see that the adult, were hiding in awe, a parent or guardian. And this is a very peculiar kind of, it showed the kind of social sentiment that the stage has given to children at the central of the focus. Okay, and in between fall and winter is our story, when the story will begin. Okay, and that's show the next thing. And let me read you one paragraph. This is a 16th century observation of the city life in Beijing, on the capital. On the 15th day of the 7th lunar calendar, as people go sweeping the ancestor graves, as they would during the Qingming festival in the spring, some bring along small bags they themselves have made. No sooner is the sacrificial rite over and done with, then they move on to the sideways of the cemeteries, searching for crickets. Those who filled up their bags are overjoyed as they carry their catch away on a grass stalk over the shoulder. For on that same month, people begin fighting with crickets. Strong men and scholars alike engage in this. Special fighting grounds are created for the game. Each of these fighting grounds comes with its own host. For their breeding, there also exist professional masters, just like the specialized fighting pots, snatching poles. This is, I'm showing, snatching poles, and keeping urns. There appears no single house now which comes unequipped with them all. Okay, let's show the equipments. These are the late imperial equipments. They're now museum items. That's the pole, the snatch, the fan to, sort of fan, to help them, fan away the grassy grounds and look for these pricey creatures. That's the urn. And these urns worth million because people lost their estate for this, and that little thing, I don't know whether you realize what this thing is the drinking cup for the tiny little fellow. Each one of the master, the gladiator, would take up one residence in this. And those, from the way they're made of gold, jewelry, and each of this part, they're special masters making this, and they're sets. These make this worth a fortune back then. Okay, what happened to this presumably, solemn, serious-minded people? Because the people who say that the common custom of the capital folks, and it went on more, beyond the capital, getting into the game of cricket fighting never involved simply small children from back alleys. Many in the ranks of nobility and upper elite are led astray from their normal duties because of it. Numerous among the rich and the powerful also cast their fortune away, just as countless gentlemen have laid their study aside. Though it appears that this may be on the wane, since now merely darling boys and tender girls continues to indulge in the game as usual. Okay, this is the kind of game that it was like the stock market that caught most people's fancy, that had a lot of people, bank their fortunes, gamble with it. That's serious enough to cause the court to have a recess every year for 3 weeks or so for people to go into this. And cricket was picked because of the fact that everybody wanted a game. They don't want bloody games anymore because of under New Confucianism and Buddhism and all these other things, belief in life and Taoism. They want a serious game, and cricket only lived for a short life. So it fit people's need to want to have a ferocious game with their fantasy. And yet, it would not sort of lay people's life to waste. People before then, they fought with beasts, bear, dogs, chicken, those require too huge of a playground. The space were running out, and also it went on forever. People didn't have time for those. Okay. When this happened, it happened also at a time when philosophy and culture was getting into classical studies and philology. So they did, these were just artworks. They went back and dig up 2,000 years of records to as far back as the Book of Odes, and your professors here will be able to tell you that's 5th or 6th century BC, and try to find as hard as they can about the traces of this. And the closest they find out, bearing the same name, is this animal, except it's considered as not a fighting bug, but a singing bird. Well, I will take you then through the Chinese medieval zoological garden to show you, how a creature with its relations with man had made through the 2,000 years and transformed. And also, then look at re-examining our understanding of knowledge and sort of cultural reproduction. Okay, that is called a grass chicken, 沙鸡, it's a cricket. Okay, this is a chicken. This is a bird. It's not a chicken, but it's a singing bird. You could see that in kind of proportion and size and perspective, that other fellow, we could show it together for people to compare. In terms of artistic representation and an intellectual conceptual take, I don't know whether we could show these two, there's a chicken, grass chicken. This is a bird. Okay, people thought that, the characteristic, it depends on how one would, sort of categorize. Remember, this is pre-Darwinian times. The way people would define a bird is that it flies and it sings. And you would realize that that other fellow, it's beautiful, gracious, it flies and sings. That was before people realized that 1 out of hundreds of them may also engage in combat. Okay, and let's show people what the birds are like in the drawings. Oh, these are singing things. In classical times, these creatures attracted people's attention because of, I would say, if not narcissistic, anthropocentric sort of interest humans have Chinese have among themselves. This is what the code of the Book of Odes said about crickets. In the 7th month, they are out in the fields, the 7th month by lunar calendar. In the 8th, under people's roofs. In the 9th, behind people's door. In the 10th, the cricket comes beneath my bed. Let me read you again. It's a song, it's a lyric. In the 7th month, they are out in the fields. In the 8th, under people's roofs. In the 9th, behind people's door. In the 10th, the cricket comes beneath my bed. Okay, so that shows that people took a fascination on them because they thought these were human-loving creatures. They moved along, they have a sense of time, which the Chinese loved, humans loved. They have a sense of time, and as it gets cold, they seem to have a tendency of wanting to get close to me. The center of warmth and brilliance and brightness. Okay, that was what caught their attention. Okay, in medieval times, what we heard are this. These were Tang, 8th century court ladies. They continued with the idea that these were beautiful, objects with beautiful voice. So with the arrival of every fall, the courtesans, ladies in waiting, and their kind will catch crickets with small golden cages in the palace, shut them in those, and slip them away under their pillows, so as to listen to them singing at night. Ordinary folks from common households have invariably begun to follow suit in this. In other words, for the first 1,000 years, they think that they're flying, there are all kinds of debates as to how they could fly or with what were they making their beautiful songs. And by the way, in Japan to this day, the Japanese, would keep cricket only, as like in a time capsule until about this Tang times. They would avoid, keeping the 1 out of 100 times of the male that would fight, and they would keep the rest. And for a pricey singing object because they make such beautiful voice, sound. Okay, so in between this time and the next time is how, you see a lot had changed in society. You see, for the, 5, 6 centuries in between, how Chinese life, society had become, crowded, urbanized, prosperous, yes, but people got to be very busy, affluent, yes, but their pastime need to be all couched in more, smaller and smaller space. And they have more money to spend and more money to spend on less time and smaller spaces to entertain themselves. You see the long coming of eventually, the sort of modern society, I suppose. Okay, these were the 15th century urns. You see that, and I would eventually come to tell you it's a story about civilization and also a story about childhood. When everybody would start to long for something that's lost in the culture, in the history, but in their own personal lives too. That the attraction of the wildness, however short that time span was. So they keep this thing on their palm. These people wrote about it. The things that would remind them of their innocent times, 3 weeks, 20 days in a year, but all year round, when the insects are no longer with them, they will wash these urns and think and lament and try to remind themselves that when they were in these ferocious court politics, when they're debating about, and all deadly serious about philosophy, when they're going out to the market to make money, that there's something out in the wild, nature calling. They thought that the empire may have lost its innocence to all of these ferocious battling. And they no longer want to engage in bloody combat with, people, on these barbaric sort of nomadic tribes. They no longer want to see bloody games playing in their town, but they still have a craving for gamble, and both men and women. And the little boys from the outside in the outskirts of towns in the 12th and 13th century to the 16th century taught the adults that you could play with these, that they would not bleed, but they were ferocious. If you would only imagine, if you would only focus, look at these urns. These were pricey things. And people could lose their complete estate by engaging in the gambling of these. Remember, you've seen crickets, how little they are, right? And by the end of the tale, you will be amazed. Well, these are their palace of the gladiators. They have created the amphitheater on their palm as a completely civilized culture, that they would only gamble with their mind. And they would, and this is the court urn. They are. If you sort of look at the bottom of these things, some of these are the objects themselves are still existent. They're sets, and they are craftsmen who would make nothing but this. They would sign their name, and they're much sought after at the time. People could, exchange their entire estate mansion for one pot of this. I'll tell you about the economy later. Okay, this is how they would look like in actual. This is the pathway of each of the gladiator. They would put each of this then in the urn, as their sort of, you could say hallway, living room. I mean, they give concubine, they reproduce the entire human nature, culture to these 0.7 of an inch kind of little fellows, and have them carry the entire burden of this civilization and empire, and fought their battles for them. Okay, these were the carriers of the urn. You will see the instrument, right? It's got 4 pots. Look how elegant this was. They would carry this to the amphitheater to carry their gladiators. They weigh their gladiators in these things. This is a closet, when they would to make sure it's like the heavyweight and lightweight champion, right? Yeah. They have all kinds of grades so that you would not fight with, if yours is 0.72, mine is 0.71, mine would not engage in the combat with you. Okay, and they're giving personal names for people who could read Chinese. Look, they have their birth date, they have their size, they have their physical feature. This is an entire society, you would say, that had gone crazy. I won't make any comments about the sports here. But I would want you to show you, this aspect of, the size. The size, and each one of them has, and it's called the #1 bug of the empire, if we show the very beginning of the catalog. And each of the bug, they have graveyards, they have cemetery, they have banquets, they have invitation cards to invite mine will invite yours to come, and then look at one another and engage, consider, an engagement. Okay, and this is a biography, the beginning of a biography. Each of the bug has biographies. I have gathered over 1 million words of biographies of crickets, if you care to read them. My point is, again, that how will we be able to read the world, what's happening to the world, through one single falling sleeve? Yes, these kids were innocent, right? And that it began as a kids played. But we all know that childhood and childlike years had not just to do with the physical children. This was painted just 2 years ago in Shanghai. And let me show you another work where this just came to, I bought this piece from Suzhou last year. The kids with their urn, and they're looking at the crickets that they breed. And this is my very last illustration. It had to do, and Professor Bokenkamp would enjoy this. It had to do with people's notion about life, about nature, and about human existence in it. Here's a society that had gone well on the road of cultural and cultivation. And their spaces were getting smaller and smaller, both in physical sense, on their mind, by account of money and power and ideas. And people were trying to find some way out. They want to find a perfect fit where they could imagine the kind of things that they could enjoy. And they collectively, through long period of time, thought hard and fought and struggled, and they had identified this bug that to build everybody's love, fascination, frustration, and fantasy about is the cricket. So there's the politics. Let me read you some about the politics involved. This is the official biography of the Prime Minister of the Southern Song who lost the empire, they said, because he got engaged in cricket fight. When the siege of the city of Xiangyang became imminent, Jia Sidao sat on the hill of Ge daily as usual, busy himself with the construction of stories of houses and layers of pagodas. Just as he continued to take in the beautiful among the court ladies, street prostitutes, or Buddhist nuns as his concubines, indulging in merrymaking as his routine. Only old gambling gangsters could approach him for a play game, as no one else dared to peek in to his residence. As he had been squaddling on the ground to engage in a cricket fight with his entourage of concubines. Women were the masters of this. They host these gambling. And Jia Sidao, in the official biography, according to the sort of the correct kind of ethics, was depicted this way as the person who lost, lost everything, lost his character, lost politics, lost the empire. But if you look at he immediately was enshrined as the deity and the patron of all games and plays in Imperial China. Every single playbook carried, his name as the author, as the patron. And so, in other words, when the philosophers and others, were trying to make things right, the need of most of the common folks were so intense that there was the economy. I won't get into the economy. The economy was huge for the supplying of this. There's organized sort of mart and trade and trafficking of these life subjects. You have to remember they're marts to be visited every day, by the pick up their gladiators. Okay, and then of course there's a huge market in the knowledge of breeding, of gambling, of playing with this. How to design the game. How many different kind of weighing and this and that. Okay, let me just read you two of my final reflections, and then to invite a discussion. The first Chinese encounter with this creature of ephemeral existence began with an amazement and admiration over the movement of the bug through the distance, the gift of seasonal temperament, and the ancient poet's wistful sonnet, a self-fulfilling speculation that the bond between them and us, their prospective house-dwelling masters, was sealed as a vital attraction of them to us, not us to them at first sight. As humans, the Chinese gained in age, as their civilization also advanced in time. This fascination, prompted by a physical segregation, which in turn created the condition for an alienation reinforced, became itself the very essence of an insatiable longing of departure and return to the wilderness, as childhood represents in that culture, thereby the preciousness of being in constant keeping with the country kids' useful play. This classical aspiration with constant mutating wildness and the medieval love for a strange resonance that people perceived or conceived as received from the natural attributes of a cricket became altogether another epic when the post-medieval urbanites found their nostalgia on the fresh country air that the bugs carried with them, just as their still later metropolitan patrons, each trying to recover her childlike fun in the daily struggle for fame and gain, deprived of any trace of the luxury of innocence, with no guarantee whatsoever of dazzling victory or devastating loss. History, philology, hermeneutics, or philosophy, even politics and economics, when seen through such bioanthropological lenses, carry a power of persuasion, backing us as residents and neighbors of a still later time and a more crowded earth, to be less creation of our own tradition, identification, or views, in consideration of some puzzling tales of perhaps an entirely unexpected kind. That's my thoughts. Let's put on the first illustration and then